In this video, I'm going to take a look at a game which I won in a technical fashion. It's not something I do very often because usually my opponents don't let me. And, well, the opening was a Vienna. So we have e4, e5, knight c3, knight c6, and now a strange move, g3. And I just played d6, defending the pawn. And after bishop g2, bishop e6, knight f3, bishop e7. This was the last game I could find in the database. Here my opponent played castles, but the engine really likes this move d4. So after castles, I just continue the development with queen d7. Not because I necessarily want to castle queenside, although I may, and then decide to push the pawns on the other side. But after rook e1, I continued with knight f6, again not really showing where my king is gonna go yet. And now my opponent played this move d3, which I think it's a little passive, not opening up the position while my king is still in the center, because after d4, well, the threat is to play d5 and you're gonna either win a bishop or a knight. So after d3, I castled. And now my opponent blundered with h3, which is understandable since this was a blitz game, but well, my opponent likes to play quickly, and that's what happens when you play a little bit too quickly. So I just took the pawn, and now he went knight g5. I took the bishop, and after king takes, kick the knight with h6. Also, I'm playing h6 because there's potential ideas of the rook coming to the h file and putting pressure on the pawn on h7. So now at least the pawn is protected by the pawn on g7. Here the knight drops back to h3, which I don't really like that move because, again, you want to put the rook on h1 and then potentially sacrifice the bishop here because you're down a pawn, so you kind of have to go for some kind of compensation along the h file, I suppose. And after this move, well, now I can force the trade of queens, more or less, because if white decides to avoid the trade of queens with something like queen d2, my queen is very active on this square, very aggressive, like right in front of his king. So we traded, and well, I was happy with my position at this point because I'm up pawn. We traded queens. White doesn't really have any tricks. I have better development. This bishop's still undeveloped. This rook is still undeveloped. All I have to do is move this rook and I'll have all my pieces in the game. So my opponent played on this move, knight d5, and here I thought about playing rook c8, but I didn't want to give up my dark scored bishop, so I just went back. And after this move c3, which is stopping the knight from coming to this square, I dropped back the knight with the threat of taking. So my opponent went back with the knight, and I just decided to keep trading, simplify the position. And after bishop takes f5, I want to open up this file for my rook. And now my opponent played actually the best move according to the engine, a4. And I played this move knight g6, which is not very accurate, but it's not like it's giving away all the advantage. And here my opponent played f3. f4 might have been a little bit better, so I just continued pushing the pawn. And after we trade and trade, well, it's not very clear who's gonna attack who, because if the king moves out of the g file, both of the rooks could come to the h and g files and put a lot of pressure on me, especially with the bishop. So I decided to get rid of the bishop by playing bishop f6, and my opponent recaptured, which I was happy because, well, now my rook is more active. If you notice, when he trades, the piece is no longer here, whereas this bishop that was here gets replaced by another of my pieces, the rook. So I'm up a pawn and my rook is slightly more active, which means that, well, my position is just a little bit better. It's not winning by any stretch of the imagination, but it's just those little advantages that you keep accumulating after move after move after move that eventually become something that is an advantage that will overwhelm your opponent. So here my opponent played this move, which surprised me. I thought he was going to play rook h1, so I decided to trade. Now, this endgame, I'm not too worried about losing it, but I know that my chances against good endgame technique by my opponent are pretty much going to be enough to secure a draw. So I just go for rook f8, and here my opponent played d4, g5, and my opponent expands on the other side. Played king g7, c4, and here my opponent played the decisive mistake, e5. I thought maybe something like b5 or pushing a5 would have been better, but e5 is just losing because 2 pawns is just too much. Because after takes, rook e8, you're gonna lose the pawn. He defended it, but now I can just attack it. And I mean, you can try to counterattack, but after rook e6, well, I'm just gonna capture with a king next move, so you're just gonna lose. So he played this move, and I captured. And again, my opponent played a very bad move, a5. I think much better is rook d1. I think his best chance is to maintain the rooks on the board, because after this move I have to go rook e7, I think, and after rook check, the king drops back, and yes, I'm better, but the rook is maintaining control of this file, which means that my king potentially is not going to be able to support the h-pawn down. So if I can't push the pawn, then I can't really make much progress. Instead, he went a5, which allows me to take, and now his king is all the way back. My king is more centralized. I'm up 2 pawns. This is a very simple win. So after this, well, there's really not much to analyze. He went here. And now he played c5. Maybe playing c5 earlier, one move before would have been better. So if c5 here, well, king d5, b6, c takes b6, a6, and after takes, well, the king is just in time to capture the pawn. So back here, the trick is not to take with the a pawn, because now, well, again, here it doesn't really matter because the king is close enough. But if the king was not close enough and you had to take with this pawn, now you're just losing. So I mean, I don't think I would have fallen for that trick, but it was definitely something to watch out for. So after this, well, he just pushed and I just took the pawn, and he kept pushing, like, I don't know why he's not resigning, but okay. I take, king moves, and okay, here I just went to grab a queen, and finally he resigned. So I thought this was a very interesting technical win. Maybe not tactically, there wasn't much going on, but up 2 pawns and trying to convert that, sometimes it's not so simple, and sometimes it is. It all depends on how well your opponent knows different endgames. So if you like the video, please like, share, and subscribe. And thank you for watching.